There are people who want us to be outraged. And so they use strong emotions like disgust and shaming and anger in order to get our attention. And oftentimes, they don't care very much about nuance or even what is really true. All they care about is getting more likes on Facebook, more followers on Twitter, and there are actually people who are paid to get our attention, and they use outrageous methods in order to do that. At Grace Cathedral, we had our own experience of this. Our beloved deacon, Doe Yates, died very recently, but for many years, she was the only African American we had on our clergy staff. And so at the cathedral, we wanted to do a service that especially raised up the leadership of African American women. And so we had a service where we sang and listened to the music of Beyonce. When the media and the internet got a hold of it, it just blew up. There are people on the radio saying that at Grace Cathedral, we worship Beyonce. And I had an old friend from a previous church of mine. We were very close and loved each other very much. And she left a voicemail message for me, but it was just filled with vitriol and hatred. She believed what the internet said rather than trusting that her friend would do the right thing. Now, the reason I'm bringing up these examples is it reminds me very much of what I see as people's response to critical race theory. A lot of people don't really know what it is or haven't studied it very much, and I want to share my own experience as someone who's studied critical race theory and benefited enormously from it. I want you to try to imagine this. Imagine a world in which there are hardly any African American judges or law professors or law partners or partners at large law firms or any big city DAs. And imagine that there are no other people of color in those roles either. If you're old enough, you don't have to try to imagine that, because that was our experience when we were growing up. That was what the world looks like. And it makes sense that as society recognized how wrong that was, and as new people started coming into the profession, that they would begin to see it with new eyes, and to help us to recognize things that were true all along, but that we just hadn't noticed very much before. Some of the things that critical race theory has taught me is to be more suspicious of objectivity, that we all are constantly making judgments, and it's not fair to think that somebody's going to be totally impartial. Critical race theory has also reminded me how important gender is in our experience of the law. It also has taught me how important it is not just to depend on abstract principles, but to be honest about the historical realities that we've inherited. My uncle, Charles Lawrence, was in law school in the 1960s, and he was one of only 3 African Americans in his class. There were only 3 women in the law school at the same time. And he said that despite the civil rights movement being in the newspapers constantly, despite riots happening in all the major cities, that just from what was happening in law school, you couldn't even tell that anything like that was happening in the world. It was so cut off from the realities of real life. He said that you could almost not even tell that race was a category that people used to understand each other from his experience in law school. So I'm very grateful for those critical race theory experts who helped us to see the world in a new way. And it really all comes down to a fundamental religious value that all those theorists, all those academicians share in common. And that is the religious principle that all people should be respected, that all people have an inherent dignity. And for me, that's what America is all about. What makes America great is our striving to recognize that dignity in every person. My name is Malcolm Clemens Young. I'm the Dean of Grace Cathedral in San Francisco, California. And I thank you very much for watching More Good News.